everybody, and welcome to another fun-filled, expeditious, whatever you want to call it, episode of Radiorama, where I show you how to work on radios, television, stereo systems like this guy. And what we have here is a 1961 Westinghouse, and I took the back off so I don't remember the model. Wasn't able to find the model online anyway, but it's a what I would call a budget model stereo system. And it seems interesting that at about this time period there were a few, I guess you could call them gimmicky things that some of these manufacturers were doing when it comes to their stereo systems. And this is probably the fourth brand that I've worked on that uses the concept that this one has, which is this is actually a 3-channel amplifier, meaning there is a right and a left channel, and then there's a center bass. And usually the bass is in the middle, and then you have your right and left channels, of course, on either side. This one's really weird, though, and I'm not sure why they designed it this way. But if we look here, we have on one side, and these are pitifully small speakers, but I'll explain why they did it this way. You have a small speaker here and a tweeter above it. Likewise, on the other side, we have a small speaker and a tweeter. But then we have a rather large center bass speaker. And so what happens is that the bass kind of makes up for the lack of fidelity that you get from these smaller speakers. Kind of like it kind of fills out the sound. Now, I'm not sure why they chose to do this. Maybe because they couldn't fit it in the cabinet in the center because of this large box for the records. But they've put the bass speaker on the left side. And so that means when listening to it, it's going to sound a little off. This system actually still works fine. I am still going to take the chassis out and take a look. It makes no humming noise, zero. And so I'm thinking maybe that the electrolytics are maybe they're fine. You get into the 60s and the quality and reliability of electrolytic capacitors started to get a lot better. The other thing that happened during this time period is if you bought it and it was quote-unquote a stereo, the only thing stereo about it would be the record player. And radio, FM particularly, would be mono. That is, unless you opted for a optional multiplex adapter. And this is the plug for that adapter, and then obviously there's nothing there. So whoever bought it did not opt to get the multiplex edition. Probably would have been a little thing that would have plugged in there and maybe be bolted down here. It is definitely a lower end model. I can pick this thing up myself. It's pretty light. What it's got going for it is pretty terrific styling. This styling is super in demand. We're optioning to take this to one of our shows, which is next week, and it's probably not going to take much to get this thing completely sorted out. I want to kind of clean up and this dried out finish. It's a flat finish, so there's going to be no waxing on this one. Maybe some beeswax. The record player has already been dealt with because one of our members, Kyle, worked on it. In fact, we had a whole bunch of radio guys come over here last night, and we had quite a good time, as seen by this video.
Chicken legs, I have chicken legs, I have the chicken legs, chicken legs, I have chicken legs on my big fat bratwurst body.
Anyway, like I said, we had a good time. I believe in order to get this unit out is going to require, I remember looking at it, there's a screw here, and when I take that out, I'm assuming this whole thing just pops out, and there's screws underneath that hold the unit in, and obviously it can't come up because we have these knobs here, and it's going to have to come down. Obviously, it can't come up through this panel here. I kind of dig the this knob here. It looks more like an oven knob than a radio knob, but whatever. Uses some weird tubes that I'm not as familiar with. The output tubes are 7695s. It's more of a Compactron looking design. I say Compactron, maybe it isn't. But I got a spare because I wasn't sure if the ones in it were any good. They obviously are because we had it playing last night, but here's what they look like. Big fat tube. I'm thinking I'll have to look up these specifics of this. I'm kind of wondering if there's the equivalent of 2 tubes per bottle, so you get, you know, your proper push-pull audio, or it could be single-ended. Like I said, this is kind of a cheaper unit. I say cheaper, but you'd be surprised how much even the cheap units back in this era would have cost. Something like this probably would have set you back around $200, which in 1961 was quite a bit of money. It's a lot of money for now. We tend to take for granted how cheap electronics have become, because back then it was a lot of intensive manual labor assembling these guys. And so naturally the costs were quite high as a result, no matter what it was, even if it was a cheaper unit. Upper end unit could cost as much as $1,000. And again, that's like 1961 dollars. $1,000 back then, it's about half the price of a car. And that's the reason a lot of these old consoles have survived, because the people that bought them remembered the pain of that expenditure. So I'm going to remove the chassis. Again, I think the electrolytics are okay on this thing. We actually had it playing for about 2 or 3 hours last night while we were sitting around. And so let's take a looky-loo. This might be depending on how little there might be to do on this one, I might make this a dual episode. I have a Westinghouse FM unit over here, the big one with the wavy thing on the right side. We'll see. I'm not going to promise anything because I've done that before, and I wind up only making the episode about one thing. We'll see. Well, I'm finding this to be an aggravatingly stupid design. It's not service friendly at all. Just to get that faceplate off, I'm not sure if you can see those, but I have to get my driver all the way up there to those screws, and then to get the chassis out. This is confusing. It appears that you have to remove these screws here, and then there's some back here, like these two guys, and they're fucking difficult to get at. I've also come to the realization that I don't think this has a power transformer. It appears to possibly be a hot chassis design, and I'm wondering about that because we've got a bunch of nylon washers that are isolating this cabinet physically. So again, it's a cheap design. It's got curiously large output transformers. I wonder what that guy is over here. Again, I can't find this model online, so I can't find a schematic to confirm what stuff is. I'm almost tempted to put this thing on its side or upside down or something so I can get at this easier, because I'm on my back and I'm having a hard time just even seeing shit, so we'll get there. All right, well, that little trick worked. I just set this thing on its side where it will stay. And by the way, when I was working under here, I stood up and like nailed my head on this guy, and it still hurts. So here's the chassis, and yeah, it's a hot chassis, and it's luckily everything that the user could possibly touch is physically isolated. You've got essentially spacers between anything that the chassis touches and the user touches. So all the controls, all basically the stuff that someone can get at, like the connections for the antenna and all that jazz, that's all isolated. There's a few things that need to be replaced here. These green guys, those are just old school paper caps that need to be replaced. That one feels awful loose. Oh, fuck. It looks like it came loose there. Well, we know where it goes. Luckily, this thing has the schematic printed on the bottom, so I'm not completely out of luck when it comes to where things go. It's nicely marked. So I think that electrolytic is totally fine. In fact, I'm going to go over to the museum because first of all, I need to get a cap checker, and second of all, last night I was using my multimeter, and one of my friends who was over here was helping me try to check some stuff, and we realized one of the leads wasn't working. And so I need my multimeter to work, and so I'll go over there. I'm also going to see what weird value caps we have here, because maybe I'll need to get some over there as well. So we have this guy, this guy. I think there's another one of those somewhere. Those need to be replaced, and then we have some soft, dry electrolytics. There's one here, there's one here. There's a little guy here. So not a whole lot going on here. So it's kind of surprising. I mean, it's just literally a little bit of a nicer table radio that they've managed to put into a gigantic empty wooden cabinet. Don't want to lose any of my nuts and bolts either. Alright, well, it's interesting here. What do we got? Back up to 001 rated cap going from ground to floating ground. Fascinating. Anyway, I'll shut up. I'm going to get my ass over to the museum, get a replacement lead, and maybe some of these electrolytics that I need. I don't know if my tube tester will test these guys, but I'll test both of those. And clean up some of these controls. All these pots are kind of sticky, especially the function switch. The other thing I need to do is find a way how to inject an audio signal. It does not have an auxiliary input. It's only record player. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in through the multiplex connection. I need to figure out which is what here. I think this is probably 110 volt power. And this looks like a shielded cable. So that's probably multiplex input. I'm not sure how that works because you've only got, looks like the ground and one lead. Then again, I'm not sure how multiplex works. It's some sort of weird hocus pocus magic stuff that I'm not sure how multiplexes work. Someone explained it to me one time, but it's like black magic or something. All right, I'll be back in a little bit. Got to go run over there, get some stuff, and I'll be back. Yay, new leads. These are probably better quality. The thing is I've had this for about 10 years, and one day I took it over to the museum, and I think someone mistakenly thought that this was the museum's, and they took the leads off of it, the original fluke leads, and there's some cheap Chinese leads that I found, and those did not hold up. These look like cheap Chinese leads as well. I might order some fluke leads. It's worth it. I got back, and one thing I noticed is that, yes, the user is technically isolated from the chassis, but then we've got this cap going from chassis to this, and then this braided copper wire is soldered to this. I'm doing some thinking out loud here. Okay, never mind. I just want to make sure that the user cannot touch this. I mean, nothing is not going to touch anything live. So I think what I'm going to do is at some point I'll plug it in, and we'll do a test to see when it's turned on, do we have any voltage or current on the bits that the user touches like this. I don't think they will, but I'll shut up and I'm going to go ahead and start replacing components, and then we'll do some safety tests to make sure that we're good in that regard. Alright, so the electronic work is done. We have a couple caps up top side, The cap that was going to this part of the chassis, I decided to reduce the capacitance down to 0.01. That is a safety cap. Because when I looked at the underside here, that is one side of B+. So I'd rather not be going to the chassis like that, or the metal. The rest of the little electrolytics I replaced here. And also what I did before I decided to test it, I tested the tubes. It's kind of interesting tubes. They are a 50 volt single section output tube. I guess, if I remember correctly, I believe it is a Westinghouse design. And I think the advantage that I saw was that it consumes less power. I'm not sure why they would choose this tube, though. I'm not sure if maybe it's because they owned the patent to that tube, and so you had to buy their tubes and put more money in their pockets. Because this tube only puts out about 4.5 watts. So this is single-ended output, 4.5 watts per channel. That's pretty pitiful. That's basically about the same as a single 6v6 tube. Anyway, both of these tubes are now, these two are testing quite good. This other one was quite weak, so I took it out of circuit. And so now I'm going to plug these tubes in, and I might just go over and hook up the speakers because it's easy. Just hook them up here and there and see hopefully if it still works, because when I was working on it, there was a little piece that fell out of the underside, and I'm not sure where it goes. That's kind of a bad problem. Where did it go? It's this guy. It's some sort of spade. So I hope to God the damn thing still works, or it's going to be really, really, really aggravating to try to figure out where that came from. It's time to clean up these controls. Spray them with a little juice. This guy was really stuck. Feels really gummy. Oh, it's starting to loosen up now. Let me put a little more juice in there. I think it's that grease has solidified on the indentations here. Yep, much better. And we'll get the rest of the contacts and the controls. We're going to just fill the pots with juice. I was running out of that stuff. I guess I'll have to get my other can. There we go. I'm using, controversially, WD-40, and I know people swear up and down it's the juice of the devil, but I've had good luck with it. So if you don't like doing it yourself, then you don't have to do it. Whoops, almost lost it there because I'm doing this one-handed, which I probably should not be doing. All right, let's work all that stuff in. Oh yeah, now we're cooking with Crisco. And that is starting to feel a lot better. While we're at it, let's get some of the other bearing surfaces, like this puny little tuning condenser. I've seen tabletop radios with nicer tuning condensers than that. Kind of ridiculous. All right. That feels pretty good. Let's get this last little pivot joint here. And we're rolling. All right, get these guys. That Tri-Flow sure has a funny smell to it. I probably shouldn't be breathing the fumes. Let's touch these guys up just a little bit more. I want to make sure they're going to be free. I just shot myself in the face with it. How nice. That's the on-off switch. And volume pot. Okay. Do or die time. Take it over to the the cabinet, and plug her up, see if we still have sound happening. All right, here we go. Turn this sucker on. Oh, it's on. Okay, never mind.
Book a limited time sailing from San Diego and get ready for a dream come true with Disney Cruise Line.
350,000 in his indexed universal than the other.
I think, it's huge. Like, we always say it's contagious, but when the first guy gets a hit,
All right, we appear to be working just fine. I need to confirm that the record player is still doing its thing, which it should be, but that's good news. Whatever that little spade was must have not been anything. That's kind of a relief. I do want to do some safety tests here. I can't really do it one-handed, but what I want to do is confirm that we're not getting any kind of heavy-duty current on any of the areas that someone might touch, which again I don't think is possible because there's all these grommets isolating everything from that chassis. And even so, I've put the only connection to the chassis, which is that cap, down to such a low level that should get us well under the safety threshold. I think our safety threshold is actually a little extreme. We're at hospital grade. GFCI outlet will trip at under 5 milliamps, and our standard, I believe, for what we pass as safety is around 2 milliamps, so less than half of that. But it's not a bad idea, I guess. We should observe safety protocols the best we can. But it actually is, I think it sounds a little better. I think some of those caps must have been quite leaky. In fact, I saved one of these because I was curious. When you see this one, it says mica mold Tropicap. And first of all, I think that brand is intentionally misleading. They wanted people to think, oh, it's a mica cap. Of course, mica, molded mica cap, that must be really good. But when you blast them open, it's just an old-fashioned paper cap. They're pretty leaky, as are these guys. And so those have all been replaced. And so I think what I'm going to do, again, do the safety test, and then I'm going to have to figure out a way to get an audio signal that someone can plug their Bluetooth in. I think I'm going to go in through the stereo multiplex adapter spot. And while I've got it plugged up, I can check to see where the 110 volts is and isn't, because I sure as hell do not want to run audio through 110 volts. That would be pretty destructive. Okay, so I'm doing the safety test here to an extreme. This is running all the way from my tester unit. And I'm touching the shafts. That sounds dirty, but anyway, let's do both polarities. That's good. So our maximum threshold on this scale is 0.6, so 0.6 of a volt, and we're at 0.4 of a volt, so we're 0.2 underneath the max threshold, which is stated as already quite low. So we can resume with the restoration. Again, I want to figure out which leads that are on the multiplex are my incoming. I think I know which ones they are, but I want to confirm something before I go any further. Okay, so I found the multiplex audio. It's right here where it's marked MX. It's multiplex audio return. Now, being the hot chassis that this is, I'm not going to be able to run the audio directly to this connection like I would on most consoles that have a power transformer, because the user could get a little bit of a nasty tingle from if they were to touch the 3.5 millimeter jack that's going to come out the back for multiplex. So I'll need to run an isolation transformer like I do for most of the other floating chassis sets that I work on. And so I will need to determine which, what I can do to assume where the negative is look for the ground for the volume pot, which one is it? Damn it, I can't remember. Let me look at the loudness. Okay, it's below the selector. So it's this guy. And that's the top of the pot right there. Obviously that's the ground, because you've got all this crap going around, and plus it's even attaching to this chassis part. So that is true ground, and hence the reason why we're going to need to use an isolation transformer. So just to confirm that this is going to work, I'm going to temporarily and dangerously tack in a 3.5 millimeter shielded cable. And well, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I am going to go ahead and get the isolation transformer. I'm going to run it. I'm probably going to attach it here, and it looks like that we don't really have a means to do right and left channel via the multiplex. It's going to be mono, which I don't think is necessarily the end of the world, because this unit is already suspiciously not exactly what I'd call true stereo, since we've got one giant speaker on one side, which is kind of fucking up the whole principle behind stereo in the first place. So we will need to tie the right and left channels together, and I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. But I need to go find an isolation transformer first and do the deed. Alright, so we've added the audio feature. We have our right and left channels going through a pair of 90 ohm resistors, and then this is the secondary side of the isolation transformer, and this is the primary. And one end of the primary is going to the multiplex connection positive, the other side is going to ground, at least floating chassis ground. And then I've got my 3.5 millimeter cable running out here. I've got it zip corded to that guy, so you won't yank it out of there. So I'm going to get my little Bluetooth thingamabob, and we're going to go test it, see if it does what I want it to do. Okay, so I've got my Bluetooth hooked up, and I've got it set to the multiplex setting.
Chattanooga shoe shine boy. He charges you a nickel just to shine one shoe. He makes the oldest kind of leather look like new. You feel as though you want to dance when he gets through. He's a great big bundle of joy. He pops the boogie woogie rag. The Chattanooga shoe shine boy.
Well, that seems to work pretty good. You never know, it's not stereo, but that's good. So we can proceed to work on the cabinet. Ow! Damn it. That's the second time I've done that. So, again, I think we can put this sucker upright and proceed to work on cleaning up the cabinet. And then we'll do a final reassembly. And then I'm probably going to leave this on, off and on, for a week, just to make sure that we are indeed good with those original electrolytics. Otherwise, it's pretty solid. All right, it's time to work on the cabinet. Now, from afar, it looks fine, but if you notice here, we've got a little bit of dryness and discoloration. So I'm going to use a product called Old English. Yes, I know what that looks like, and that's not what it is. It is Old English, and you can see when I do this how it kind of brings back that color. I'm not sure what's in this stuff. I think it's stains and colorants and oils of some sort, but it sure does a good job. Stuff's been around forever. It's pretty cheap. I think it's like $4-5 a bottle. And you just want to go over the whole cabinet with this stuff. And don't be afraid to put it on liberally, because again, we really want to fill in all the unevenness. Probably this thing sat somewhere where it had a little bit of exposure to sun. It's probably not the best quality of finish in the first place, so all we're doing is just kind of rejuvenating it. I found out the hard way when I set this thing on its edge that the sliding doors just sit in there with gravity, and they fell out. But we'll get those as well. Again, you just want to go over the whole thing with this stuff and, you know, work it in. It gets rid of all the scratches. Listen to me, I should be their advertising executive. Or either that, or I could put it on the Price is Right. Yes, Old English makes all the furniture that you have old look new again. Old English. All right. Anyway, if I sound like I'm in a cranky mood, I kind of am. This is June of 2022. And I'm not going to go into details, but there is some shit going on in this country right now that, I don't know, really, really depressing. That's all I'm going to say about it. I've just been in a funk for the last 3 or 4 days. And working on these radios kind of gets me to keep my mind off of things. Of course, tomorrow is going to be Monday, which means getting back on the computer and being immersed with the horrors of current affairs. Plus, I've got allergies like you would not believe. So, again, we'll just go over the whole thing. And probably several times I'm going to go over it with a sealant. I think it's going to be like a beeswax, just to make sure the finish stays all sealed up and it won't dry out. All right, well, that's looking pretty good now. Got everything all nice and spiffed up. You can see it just kind of warmed up, that color. And it's pretty wet right now. I'm going to let it kind of like stew in this stuff for a little bit. I'll take the perfect opportunity to go ahead and upend it back on its side again and reinstall the electronics. I also need to clean the dial faces and stuff. It doesn't look like it's very scratched. This label came off. I need to reattach that. What does this say? There's like some print. Yes, I spilled my marbles. I kicked them over accidentally earlier. What does this say? I don't know, but some sort of adhesive company. Whatever. All right, well, I was able to put it back together again, and I made a kind of an interesting discovery. I had a heck of a time getting this off because I thought I had to loosen these bolts in the front here, but what it is, there's a bracket, and the back for the front, for the front of the chassis, you just clip it in to this bracket, and then the back 2 screws, that's what locks it in place. The other thing too is that I had a heck of a time trying to get the what do they call it, FM to what the hell do they call it? Damn it! I'm like totally drawing a blank. What is that called? About to lose my damn mind. Automatic frequency control. That's the switch. So what you can do is you can push it through to the front, and then you've got a little length of wire here, so you can reattach it to the faceplate. You don't have to go underneath. So actually, if I'd had the manual, I would have been able to have taken this apart and put it back together again in a small fraction of the time. But, you know, I just didn't know. You got to figure it out. Okay, last few things. I need to polish this plastic up. I'm going to use Novus number 2 on that. Also clean the knobs, just sitting out in the sun drying. And then we'll need to glue this decal back on. And then we will do final assembly, touch up, and test, see if they were still firing on all cylinders. Well, both the metal labels came off, and so I scraped all the paper backing off of these guys, or most of it, and I applied just a little tacky glue on the top and bottom. I don't think I should film this because I'm trying to do it one-handed, but I'm just going to push that down on the glue and then let that set out for a little bit, then we'll do final reassembly. Alright, well, she's coming along now. It's all back together again. I haven't put the sliding doors back on top of it, but I will. But I've got my Bluetooth running through it. I've certainly heard worse, for sure. Alright, let's put it on phono. Try this guy. Well, never mind, that's still going through there. That sounds good. Let's go to radio. Is it me or is FM not sounding very good?
But I can appreciate how you feel. In fact,
Feeling husband and wife, there is a
CBS, California has new plans to achieve carbon neutrality.
see you like this.
Well, crapola. I wish I hadn't done all this work of putting back together again without doing a full test of all the functions. What's happening, I believe, is probably regular FM is also interfacing with the multiplex switch. And so now that I've got essentially a transformer running across that, I'm probably killing that signal. So what I'm going to have to do is add a little switch, a tiny little micro switch, and probably what I can do, because I don't want to ruin the appearance of this cabinet, I think what I could do is maybe run the switch through here or in the back. I could just tell the people, hey, if you want to listen to the radio, you got to switch this switch back here. But what that means is that I've got to take it all apart again. I'm going to have to take all that shit out and run a switch wire off of that transformer. Oh, so annoying. Okay, that fixed it. So I got this little switch wire coming out here. And so when we get that switch installed, when we want to run the audio through and not mess up FM, we can turn that off and on. Alright, we're getting there, but we're not out of the woods yet. I remembered when I tested it the first time, it sounded like there was some rattling going on, and I thought, well, maybe I just need to tighten some of the screws in the cabinet. It's more serious than that. So this cardboard, or whatever you call it, press board stuff, it's a poorly designed cabinet. We've got gaps all up around the edges. That's causing it to rattle, especially when the bass speaker really gets going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some caulking, and I'm just going to caulk all these seams, and that'll, you know, cushion it to get it to quit rattling. I'll do it on the top and bottom. I might even also maybe glue in some reinforcement in here, or maybe put some cardboard or something to absorb a little bit of that ricochet. You generally don't want to have a hard surface like that up against another hard surface if it isn't battened down. It ain't pretty, most certainly not pretty, but I sealed up all those little loose joints, and it makes a little bit of noise. Not near as bad as it did. I think, again, I might do something. I'm thinking out loud. I'm thinking what I might do is lay a piece of thin plywood just in this area around that speaker to stiffen that up a little bit. Okay, so I've installed this dampening board here. I put a whole bunch of caulking underneath it as a cushion. Pretty much no rattles. I also elevated the wires off of here because they were rattling against the bottom. It should sound a lot better now. Anyway, let's try this again. Let's do a reassembly. What I want to do actually before I do anything else, just because I don't want to get screwed over again, is I'm going to put the switch in. I want to make sure that functionally everything is working before I bother with putting all that trim back on. Alright, much better improvement in sound quality. ready to put the trim back on. Call this puppy done. I swear to God, I'm about ready. I think I need to take a break from this thing. I got it all back together again. And there's a short in this cable.
Scratching white and brown, out scratching round the town.
Cheap shit, that's what that is. I guess you get what you pay for. So now, I've got to take it apart again. Alright, I need to take a break from this thing. This is what I get for thinking I could get this done in 2 hours. It's 2 o'clock now. I've been working on this since 9. Fuck, it's annoying. Alright, it's finally done. If I ever get one of these again, I'll be like a pit crew as far as getting the chassis in and out of there, because I'm real good at it now since I had to do it like 50,000 times. Anyway, this is FM radio. So that works good, and what we have to do in order not to interfere with FM, but we want to have clean audio coming in through my Bluetooth, we'll flip a little switch, and I'm trying to do this one hand, which is making for lame video.
Dashing and daring, a drink he was sharing with wicked Selena, the girl that I love. So in anger I challenged his right for the love of this maiden. Down went his hand for the gun that he wore. My challenge was answered in less than a heartbeat. The handsome young stranger.
Anyway, turned out real good. Again, we'll try the record player. That disconnects our signal. And we'll put this on phono and fire it up.
The lovely kind of heaven, the heaven we miss. You could be the inspiration for.
Anyway, this was a lot of fun. I say in hindsight, even though it's kind of a pain in the ass. But it looks great. I think I'm going to go over it with maybe a little beeswax just to seal it up. But as far as this video is concerned, this is done. I put a much better quality cord come out of the back, and I also put a few extra screws in the back to make sure there's no rattling. Now it gets a little flabby because it's not a very wonderful speaker that's in there, but I think for what this is, as far as the economy model, it sounds pretty good. It holds its own, so not too bad. It'll make somebody probably real happy, because this will be a great conversation piece in the living room if you wanted to have the epitome of an American mid-century model stereo, which are very popular right now. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. As you might have reckoned, this is an episode just for this one radio. This guy will be next. This took more time than I thought. Thanks so much for watching, guys. See you next time. Adios.